I never thought I'd be one of those guys who'd end up in this kind of mess. Honestly, I believed in the basic decency of people, especially family. But that illusion shattered the day I found out what they'd done behind my back in the worst possible moment. It all started with my mother's funeral. She'd been sick for years, and I knew the day was coming, but it still hit like a punch to the gut. I'd been sitting there in the pew, feeling like my chest was packed with concrete, struggling to breathe through the fog of grief. The room was filled with the scent of lilies and old wood, and I could hear the quiet sobs of relatives around me. Everyone was supposed to be mourning, supporting each other. At least that's what I told myself. Then I saw her, my wife Lisa, looking unusually close with my brother Mark. They were whispering, and I caught the way her hand brushed against his arm, laughing at something that obviously wasn't for my ears. The sight made my stomach churn, something felt off, but I told myself I was just imagining things. I was exhausted, drained from hours of crying. Later. That day I pulled Mark aside. "Hey man, you good? I didn't see you around much," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He grinned, but there was a flicker of something I couldn't quite place, nervousness. "Yeah, just hanging back. You know, grief hits everyone differently. Your wife. She's great, man. She's really been there for the family." That comment stuck with me long after I nodded and moved away. I watched Lisa from across the room, her face carefully neutral, her eyes scanning the crowd. She looked radiant but too perfect, almost rehearsed. It sent a prick of suspicion through me, but I shoved it down. I was grieving. I needed to stay in the moment, not second-guess everything. After the funeral, Lisa was unusually attentive, almost clingy. She kept finding reasons to hold my hand or touch my arm, but her eyes kept darting toward Mark in a way that made my skin crawl. I asked her outright that evening, trying to sound casual but failing. "You've been acting different today. What's going on?" She smiled a little too brightly. "Just tired, honey. It's been a long day. I'm here for you." That's all that matters. Something was definitely off. I couldn't ignore the feeling that they were hiding something from me, but I didn't have proof yet. Just a gut feeling, a gnawing suspicion that they'd been planning this betrayal behind my back all along. The next few days, I started noticing small things. My phone was missing messages that didn't show up in the usual chat log. My clothes had a faint smell of perfume I didn't recognize. And at night, I'd wake up to sounds coming from their room, muffled voices, a sense of closeness that felt wrong. I decided to do a little digging. The first step was obvious. I checked the messages. My heart pounded as I unlocked Lisa's phone, and what I saw froze me in place. There were texts, flirty, intimate, clearly more than just friendly banter. And there was a series of photos, some of them blurry from their shadows, of her leaning into Mark, whispering, laughing, basically confirming what I'd suspected during the funeral. The worst part, they'd been doing this all along, hiding it from me under my nose while I mourned my mother. It was like a betrayal from every angle. I felt my stomach rise in a knot. My hands were trembling and my mind was racing. How could they? How could she do this to me, especially now? I thought I knew her. I thought I knew my brother, but everything was a lie. I closed the phone, my fists clenched so tight I thought my nails would dig into my palms. I needed a plan. I couldn't just confront them without a clear strategy. This wasn't just about cheating, it was about trust, something shattered beyond repair. That night I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of betrayal settle like a stone in my chest. I'd always been a straightforward guy, honest and loyal, yet here I was, the fool. But I wasn't going to let this slide, not after everything. I had to give them a taste of what it felt like to be betrayed. Not with violence, not with shouting, but with something smarter. Something that would expose them completely, make them regret crossing that line. And I knew exactly how I was going to do it. But first, I had to make sure I had all the pieces. Because once I set my plan in motion, there was no going back. I spent the next few days spinning in a whirlwind of anger, disbelief, and cold calculation. The betrayal was so raw, so fresh, that I could feel it pulsing through my veins. I kept replaying that moment. I found the texts, Lisa's smile, her touch, Mark's nervous glance. It all felt like a bad joke, but the truth was too solid to ignore now. I knew I had to get ahead of them. That meant gathering more evidence, making sure I had everything I needed before making a move. I kept my eyes open, watching their routines, listening in on their conversations when I could. I didn't want to rush. I wanted to be precise, to be sure. One thing I noticed was that Lisa was strangely cautious around her phone now. She'd hide it whenever I entered the room, and she kept adding extra layers of lock screens. That told me she knew I'd seen something, and she was trying to cover her tracks. The more she tried to hide, the more obvious the deception became. I decided to install a discreet app on her phone, nothing intrusive, just enough to record the calls and texts. I wanted proof, not assumptions. It took a little effort. Her phone had a password I didn't know, so I had to wait for her to be distracted, then grab it quietly. When I finally had my hands on it again, I carefully set everything up, knowing this was the key to exposing her once and for all. Meanwhile, I started planning how I'd confront them. I didn't want a scene. I wanted the truth to hit hard, like a blow to their pride. I thought about showing them the evidence, making it clear I wasn't playing any games. I pictured their faces, the shock, maybe even shame. That's what I wanted. I was tired of being a victim, tired of feeling like a fool. One evening, I arranged to meet Mark at a local bar, just him. No Lisa, no distractions. I needed to hear his voice, see how he'd react when caught off guard. I also wanted to gauge how much he thought I knew. When he arrived, I looked him straight in the eyes and said, "We need to talk about your little secret." He hesitated, then forced a grin. "What are you talking about? Just a misunderstanding, man." I leaned in, my voice low and steady. "I saw the text, Mark, I saw the photos, and I know you two have been lying to my face. How long has this been going on?" His jaw tightened. "Look, I didn't mean for it to happen. Things got out of hand, okay? It's not what you think." I shook my head, feeling the heat rise in my chest. "You're damn right I think I know exactly what's going on, and I'm sick of being the last to find out. If you think I'm just gonna sit here and accept this, you're dead wrong." That was the moment I realized I had to act fast. I couldn't let her and Mark continue their secret affair, not without consequences. I had to make sure they understood that betrayal like this would cost them everything. The next step was figuring out how to turn this into a total exposure. I had the evidence I needed, and I knew I couldn't just confront them directly. At least, not yet. I needed to give them enough rope to hang themselves, so to speak. I wanted to see how deep this rabbit hole went. As I sat there watching Mark's face twist with shame and defiance, I felt a strange calm settle over me. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming what was mine, my dignity, my trust, my peace. I was starting to see a way to make this payback more than just words, but I wasn't finished yet. Not even close. I had one more surprise waiting in the wings, something that would shatter their illusions of control and leave them with nowhere to run. They thought they'd gotten away with it, but they had no idea what I was capable of when cornered, and I was just getting started. Over the next few days, I fine-tuned my plan. I worked out every detail, making sure I wouldn't slip up. I didn't want to just catch them. No, I wanted to make them feel the full weight of what they'd done. I was going for maximum impact, and I had to be meticulous. The evidence I'd gathered was solid. The texts, the photos, they all pointed to a relationship that had been brewing for months, probably even before the funeral. I also found out Lisa had been sneaking out late at night, meeting Mark in some shady spots, always claiming she was catching up with friends. Yeah, right, I'd seen enough to know better. My plan was simple but brutal, an emotional takedown, nothing violent, just enough to expose their betrayal completely. I arranged everything so that I'd be waiting when they tried to deny it, or worse, lie their way out. I wanted to hit them where it hurt, their pride and their lies. I decided I'd confront Lisa first. She thought I was clueless. She told me she was exhausted from the funeral, that she just needed some me time. Meanwhile, she was out chasing my brother. If I could catch her off guard, I'd reveal everything and her reaction would be priceless. I wanted her to feel vulnerable, exposed. The day came. I set up a hidden camera to record the confrontation. I wanted proof, not just for myself but for the record. When Lisa arrived home, I was ready. I played it cool, pretending like I didn't know what was coming. "You've been acting strange lately," I started, trying to keep my voice steady. I've seen the texts, the messages. I know what's been going on. Her face paled and I could see the panic flicker. What are you talking about? You're imagining things. Oh, I don't think so, I said, pulling out my phone and showing her the evidence. Look at this. Photos, conversations, the whole damn thing. How long has this been going on? She froze, eyes darting wildly. It's nothing, I swear. It's nothing, just a stupid mistake. We were drunk. It didn't mean anything. I took a deep breath, feeling my fists clench. That's bullshit, Lisa. It meant everything to me, didn't it? While I was over there crying for my fucking mother, you were out with my brother. How could you? Her voice cracked, her face twisted with guilt and shame. I was lost in grief. I didn't mean for it to go this far. You didn't mean for it, I snapped, voice rising. You're a fucking liar. I want you to leave. Pack your bags and get out of my house. I don't want to see your face again. That was the moment I saw real fear in her eyes. She knew her world was collapsing. I stayed silent, watching her stumble away. Speechless as I pressed record on the camera app. I knew I'd need that footage later, proof that I'd confronted her. Next, I turned my attention to Mark. I invited him over under the pretense of talking man to man, but I had a different agenda. When he arrived, I didn't hold back. Mark, I started, voice cold and deliberate, we both know what you've been doing. I've seen the messages, the photos. How long have you been screwing my wife? He looked uncomfortable, shifting in his seat. Listen, I didn't plan for this to happen. It just did. I didn't want to hurt you. Too late, I said sharply. You've hurt me enough. I want you to leave my house, pack your shit and get out of my life. He hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, I'll go. I'm sorry, man. I watched him leave, feeling a strange sense of closure. I'd done what I needed to do. The evidence was recorded, the emotional damage done. All that was left was to let them stew in the fallout. That night I sat alone, staring at the footage I'd captured. The raw truth was out there, now visible and undeniable. I felt a strange mixture of relief and cold rage. I'd taken back control, even if it meant losing everything I'd built with Lisa. It was clear I couldn't trust her anymore. The betrayal was too deep, but I also knew I'd come out of this stronger, with a plan to rebuild, and a warning to anyone who thought they could get away with betrayal when someone was mourning. As I looked at the recording, I thought about what I'd do next. The house felt emptier than ever, but somehow lighter. I had the proof, I had the clarity. Now I just had to decide how to move forward and make sure she never thought I'd be that easy to fool again. The fallout hit me harder than I expected. When I finally watched the footage I'd recorded, her panicked face, the trembling fingers clutching her purse, Mark's awkward departure, it was like watching my life unravel in slow motion. I felt a hollow ache in my chest, but beneath that, a cold resolve hardened. I knew I had to act fast, not just to cut her out, but to completely reset my life and make sure they'd regret what they did. The first thing I did was clear out her belongings while she was gone. Nothing dramatic, just packing her clothes, her jewelry, the little things that tied her to my house. I didn't want her to think I was vengeful, but I was determined she'd feel the sting. When she returned, she'd find her shit packed up neatly in the driveway, waiting for her to take and leave. I also reached out to a lawyer just to get some advice on how to handle the separation legally. I wanted to make sure I protected myself financially, especially since the evidence laid out what had happened. I wasn't planning on dragging her to court, but I needed to be prepared if she tried to twist things or threaten me. Meanwhile, I made sure to keep the footage safe, encrypted and backed up in multiple locations. I didn't trust her to stay quiet, especially if she realized I had it. I kept my cool, but I was constantly on edge. Every day felt like walking a tightrope, knowing that at any moment everything could blow up. I also started working out again. The physical exhaustion helped channel some of my rage, and it kept my mind sharp. Every morning I'd hit the gym, pounding the weights, feeling the sweat drip down my back as I plotted my next move. I wanted to look strong, act decisively. I knew I couldn't let her or Mark see me broken, because that's exactly what they'd hoped for. One night I sat alone in the dark, replaying everything. The funeral, the secret meetings, the lies. My stomach twisted with a mixture of anger and disappointment. How could she do this during my mother's funeral? I'd been vulnerable, grieving, and they took advantage of that moment to betray me. That's when I realized I needed to confront her directly again, but on my terms. I wasn't going to chase her or beg for explanations. No, I was going to make sure she understood exactly what she'd lost when she crossed the line. It was time for the final showdown. The morning I planned to do it, I felt a strange calm settle over me. I went to her apartment where she'd gone to stay with a friend. I knocked on her door, and when she opened it, I saw her face drain of color. She looked like she'd seen ghost. "Lisa," I said, voice ice cold, "we need to talk. There's no more hiding. I have everything I need, and I want you to know this is the end of it." Her eyes darted around, trying to find a way out. "Please, I didn't mean for all this to happen. I was just—" "Save it," I cut her off. "I've seen enough. The truth's out, and I've got the proof. You betrayed me during my mother's funeral, and you didn't even have the decency to tell me. That's not just cheating, it's cold, calculated betrayal." Her lips trembled, but she said nothing. I pulled out the USB drive, the video file, the undeniable record of her lies and treachery. "Here's your evidence," I said, holding it out. "I'm done. You can leave and don't come back. Consider this the end of us." She looked at the drive, then back at me, her eyes filled with regret and shame. "I'm sorry," she whispered, voice barely audible. "Sorry doesn't fix what you did," I replied sharply. "You've lost everything. Your marriage, my trust, your place in my life. Take your stuff and go. I'm done playing the fool." She took the drive, then slowly turned, walking out without another word. I watched her go, feeling the weight of finality settle over me. I knew I'd done everything I could to make her understand the severity of her actions. As she disappeared from sight, I went back inside, shutting the door behind her. I took a deep breath, feeling the heavy tension finally lift. I had exposed her, taken back control, and protected myself from further damage. It was over. But I wasn't naive enough to believe it was simply a clean break. I knew the emotional scars would take time to heal, and there might still be fallout. Still, I had clarity now. The truth was out, and she was gone. All I could do was move forward, rebuild what I'd lost, and never let myself be blindsided like this again. Walking away that day, I promised myself one thing: I'd never ignore those little red flags again. Trust is fragile, and betrayal cuts deep. But I also learned that sometimes the only way to protect yourself is to confront the darkness head-on and walk away with your dignity intact. The days that followed were surprisingly quiet, almost too quiet. No more late-night whispering, no more hurried footsteps in the hallway. My house, once filled with the sounds of her laughter and our conversations, now echoed with an eerie emptiness. I felt the vacuum pull at my chest, but I also felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe without that gnawing suspicion gnawing at me. I threw myself into work to keep my mind busy, but parts of me kept drifting back to that night. The confrontation, the evidence, her face as she realized everything was exposed. It was a bitter cocktail of satisfaction and emptiness. I knew I'd done the right thing, but the ache of betrayal still lingered. I had trusted her with my whole life, and she'd thrown it away. The truth was, I was angry, not just at her, but at myself for ever believing in fairy tale notions of loyalty and fidelity. That illusion was shattered now, replaced with cold clarity. She'd betrayed everything we had, and I had to rebuild from scratch, emotionally, financially, mentally. I reached out to a few friends I trusted, people who knew the situation. They advised me to stay strong, to focus on myself, and to avoid letting her or Mark manipulate the situation anymore. The truth was out there now. No more secrets, no more lies. I had my evidence, and I was ready to use it if needed. One morning, I sat in my living room, staring at the USB drive I'd kept safe. I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to let her or Mark worm their way back into my life, not even for a second. I destroyed the bridge, burned the evidence, and closed that chapter. But I also knew I needed closure, not just for myself but for my peace of mind. I contacted a lawyer again, asking about the best way to formalize the separation. I was determined to get everything legally sorted, so there be no loopholes, no way for her to come back and stir up trouble. I wanted her out of my life completely, and I was prepared to fight for it. On the legal front, I learned I could file for a formal separation, protect my assets, and ensure she couldn't come back demanding anything she wasn't entitled to. It felt empowering, like I was finally taking control of my future again. I scheduled meetings, gathered papers, and made sure every I was dotted and every T crossed. This was the first real step toward healing. In the meantime, I started focusing more on myself. I reconnected with old hobbies I'd abandoned, reading, working on my car, even taking long walks at sunset. The air smelled like rain and pine, and I reveled in those simple pleasures. It was slow, but it was real. I told myself I deserved this peace, this space to breathe without the shadow of betrayal hanging over me. One evening, I realized I hadn't slept properly since everything happened. The emotional exhaustion was catching up. So I took a different approach. I sat outside in my backyard, watching the stars flicker against the dark sky, and deliberately let myself feel the anger, the sadness, the betrayal. I let it wash over me, then slowly release. I finally understood that revenge wasn't just about punishing her or Mark. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my sense of self. It took time, but I was determined to come out of this stronger. I knew I'd have days when I'd question everything, but those moments would pass. Looking back, I realize that the biggest lesson was trusting my instincts. The signs had been there all along: her sudden clinginess, the evasiveness around her phone, the way she'd look at Mark. I ignored them, thinking I was overreacting, but ignoring red flags never ends well. I learned that the hard way. Now I'm slowly rebuilding what was broken, piece by piece. The house still feels emptier without her, but it's quieter, calmer. I don't have to tiptoe around secrets anymore. And I know the next chapter is mine to write, without betrayal, without lies, just honesty and a fresh start. Would you like me to go on with the final part? The last few weeks have been a whirlwind of legal paperwork, emotional cleanup, and a slow but steady process of healing. I finally moved out of the house we shared, left that empty shell behind, and found a small apartment nearby. It's nothing fancy, but it's mine. I wake up every morning and remind myself that I'm reclaiming control, piece by piece. The most concrete step I took was handing over her keys. I went to her new place, knocked on the door, and handed her a small box. Inside was her keychain, her house key, and a note that simply said, "This is over, never come back." Her eyes widened in shock, but she didn't say a word. She just took it, looked at me with a mixture of regret and anger, and turned away. That moment, her face, the door closing in silence, felt like the final nail in the coffin of our relationship. I also filed the paperwork for divorce, no longer willing to be tied to her lie. The process was straightforward, thanks to the evidence I had carefully stored. I wanted nothing more than to sever every connection and start fresh. The court date is set, and I'm ready for it. I don't need closure from her anymore. I already have the truth. Looking back, I realize how much I learned from this nightmare. Trust is fragile, I see that now. It can be broken in an instant if you're not paying attention. But I also learned that you're stronger than you think when you stand up for yourself. Betrayal like this tests every fiber of your being, and what matters is how you respond. I chose to confront it head-on, with honesty and clarity, rather than letting it eat me alive. I spent a lot of time reflecting, trying to understand how I let things get this far. I admit, I was blinded by love, by the assumption that family and marriage meant unconditional loyalty. But love isn't enough if it's not reciprocated with honesty. I lost faith in her, yes, but I found faith in myself again. My advice to anyone reading this who finds themselves in a similar situation: trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, don't dismiss it just because you want to believe the best. Betrayal often wears a mask of normalcy until it's too late. And when you catch the red flags, don't ignore them. Facing the truth, no matter how brutal, is better than living in denial. Revenge isn't about revenge in the traditional sense. It's about reclaiming your dignity and refusing to let someone else's betrayal define you. I didn't need to scream, curse, or lash out. My actions spoke louder. I gathered evidence, made my moves carefully, and stayed true to myself. That's the real victory. Now, as I sit here, finally feeling a sense of peace, I realize the most important thing I learned. No matter how deep the betrayal, you can come out the other side. Sometimes the only way to heal is to cut out the poison and start anew. I've done that. My heart still hurts, but it's healing, and I am ready for whatever new chapter life has waiting. Because at the end of the day, the greatest revenge is simply living well, without lies, without betrayal, with honesty and integrity. And that's exactly what I plan to do.